So in all of these Apolojustice videos, I've tried to do this eye-catching opening as I talk about the introduction of the case, which normally relates to the case in some way. So of course for part 2 of Turnabout Serenade, my idea was to do the guitar serenade on piano, but I don't play piano. So I tried and failed, I was totally unsuccessful. So I decided that, hey, what the hell? What better idea for this case, which has a lot of really good ideas but can't really stick the landing. So this is me not being able to stick the landing in a satisfying way. And instead, we'll have AGNM Piano play Guitar Serenade. Okay, so I'm so pumped to talk about this case more. I think it's so interesting as a case study in why we all love Ace Attorney. It's absolutely not the best case in the series, but it draws really clearly into focus what we do love about all of the other cases, and I'm actually going to argue that this case is not nearly as bad as you may remember it being. It actually hits a lot of really engaging and endearing points which get overwhelmed by its more glaring weaknesses. If nothing else, I want for a few of you to see this case in a different light and perhaps appreciate how brave it is and some of the chances it takes and how strong a lot of it actually is. Because if you're watching this video on my channel, the chances are really strong that you're a fan of this series. The temptation to say, Apolojustice is whack is super understandable, but since we're all fans, why not actively choose to love this series and this case even for all of its blemishes? This is Apolojustice and Turnabout Serenade Part 2, How to Write a Sequel. So as always, we start with Trucy reviewing the facts. The pin this case revolves around now is Darian. Lamirois has accused him, but his alibi is pretty inscrutable. Enter Valent Grammary. This guy really has the potential to be such an annoying and unlikable character, but the writing in this case makes a feat by making him annoying and somehow extremely likable. He is just pompous and irritating enough to be perfectly likable. The fact that he's like Fort Knox about his really lame magic trick and that he's dressed up as Lamirois here is magical. His theme is so banging, especially this transition right here. His baton twirling animation is so smooth, and by the way, all of the animation in this game is so wonderful. All of the troops' outfits are perfect. I think their design is truly top-notch, and I love the small differences in his and Trucy's costumes. I fucking love, with a whirl of his cloak and a wink of his eye, he turned and walked through the door, normally. So we talked to Maki and then Lamirois, and I know I keep saying this, but I have to hammer it home because credit where credit's due. Every character you talk to in this case is so distinct and well designed. Lamirois is perfect in her design. The way her mouth moves, covering her face, her cute hair, and her theme is so perfect. Emma Skye has found a switch under a couch that winds up being an igniter. We make our way to Gavin's office, and I'm not going to say it again, but imagine how I feel about Gavin's design, theme, and animation. It's really all S tier through this game. It's nice to see his office, and we get the most important clues of this case from him. He mentions Borginian cocoons, which are rare and illegal to ship out of Borginia. We also learn about his guitar, which was vacuum sealed and shipped from Borginia. We also get the best piece of characterization between Apollo and Gavin here. Thanks for dropping by, our forehead. Thanks? Why, you gave me so much information. That igniter, for instance. Oh, that. I've never met an attorney so forthcoming with the prosecution. It's a big help, or perhaps you're a tad naive, I guess I could have hit it, but somehow showing it felt like the right thing. I could say the same to you, Prosecutor Gavin. Thank you for the information about the strange lump of plastic, the one that Mr. Latouche was investigating. We encounter many incidents in our lives, all of us, none of them simple. That is why I try to remain at least simple inside, and I keep a simple goal: to discover the truth. This is the emotional core of the case. If you have any inkling as to who actually committed this murder, this small back and forth starts to ring in your ears slightly louder. I really think Clavier and Ohalo have wonderful chemistry, certainly as strong as even Phoenix and Edgeworth. They're written to be more explicitly mirroring one another, though they share the same ideals and even sort of go out of their way to help the other because they have this strong mutual trust and respect after one case against each other. So we return to Sunshine Coliseum to suspenseful music. Lamirois has gone missing and turns up unconscious in a guitar case. She's rushed to the hospital, and this case kicks up one more gear. So this is engaging, and it comes at a really good time in an investigation that's just getting slightly boring. On paper, the timing is nice, the drama is nice, and it seems to fit really well into the way this investigation runs. The one problem I hold here is tied to an earlier complaint. There aren't enough suspects here. If maybe one roadie is, or an additional band member was a suspect, this incident wouldn't automatically elucidate who the killer is. Because if it isn't our client, and now it can't be Lamiwa, we're positive we know who the killer is in the wrong way. We have no evidence yet, just really an educated guess that Darien is really the only one who could have done it, it seems. And it's much more obvious because, well, Lamiwa just accused him of murder. And if that wasn't enough, we go to talk to Maki Tobae about the cocoons because we suspect, though he's definitely not the murderer, he may not be totally innocent and may have smuggled one out of Virginia. As we are so close to a confession, Detective Darien rushes in and shuts down our time with him. As he escorts Maki out, he turns to Apollo and Trucy and says, "I never liked you, either of you." This is actually really strong. Darien is actually a really strong antagonist in my opinion. I think antagonists are often not characterized super well in these games. They're often given some personality after you know for sure that they're the killer and they get sort of a chance to explain themselves. See like D. Vasquez or Acro, etc. But Darien has a pretty clear MO the whole time. He's a really sore loser. He's smart and calculating with his plan, but when he's accused of murder, he gets caught in the petty challenge to his pride and tries to kill Lamiwa in broad daylight. And this line right here is so perfectly fitting of his character. He's silly and even a little likable when he seems in the clear, but when Apollo seems to be getting closer to the truth, he gets cold and even a little childish. So now that Apollo is on the same page as us about the true killer, we go to trial. So we step into the last day of trial. This is in a lot of ways where the wheels fall off sort of, because the puzzles and lingering questions have to come together well here. It's also where the bravest shots are taken, and it's probably my favorite segment to play in this case. We open in the lobby with Valiant Grammary saying, "He is heard, but unseen," and then barges in super scene. He helped with some illusion in the concert, which will become important soon. We try to accuse Darien Crescent, but his alibi is really flawless. We weren't able to get what we needed out of Maki in the detention center, so let's call him to testify under oath. Lamiwa and Tobae take the stand as translator and accused. This is really clever. It's new to have a few people testify at once, and it leads to the best instance of the perception gimmick. Lamiwa mentions that Maki doesn't speak English, which we already sort of suspect he might, and while she's talking, his eyes dart nervously at the word English, which he shouldn't recognize. This is wonderful, and the gimmick was so fun in this instance because it became the backbone of this entire Layton versus Ace Attorney cases, cross-examining a few people and watching them react to lying testimony. Lamiwa says she told Maki about the contents of the song, and this time she swallows nervously, indicating that now she's lying. It's good stuff. It's light and easy. Who to look at and where to look are relatively intuitive, and it feels really good to perceive here for probably the only time in the entire game. So Maki speaks English. I spoke about this in part 1, but this revelation is so, it just misses. We start thinking that neither Lamiwa or Maki speak English. Are revealed that, surprise, Lamiwa does speak English, and surprise, she has memory loss, surprise, she's blind, surprise, Maki isn't blind, and surprise, Maki speaks English too. Can you see the problem? It's set up poorly and paid off poorly. Lamiwa testifies again that she heard someone say, "It's over, press the switch." But there's something strange about how she witnessed the crime. It turns out that when she said she saw it through the little window, she meant through the air vent she was crawling through. We deduce that the switch was the igniter that lit Gavin's guitar on fire, which means it happened during the second set, not the third, and that Darien didn't play in that set. Lamiwa moved through the vents as part of her disappearing act, singing the whole time. This reveal actually really got me because I forgot that this pleasure line, which sounds awful, sounded bad because Lamiwa, as she was singing, heard gunshots and paused and stumbled through the line. So that's great, it's textual. And this is as good a time as any to mention, in my opinion, the reason that this case is so despised. There's a lot of evidence in the video recording of the performance. Really, the murder happened during the video, and you see it like 10 times. It's actually genuinely quite unbearable. It looks so bad, it sounds bad, it lasts way too long. There's easily 5 to 10 minutes spent idly watching this ugly ass video, and it is beyond irritating. There's no option to skip it or fast forward, and you can really only watch this once before you're like, okay, I'm cool to never watch that again. It's really not a terrible idea. It earns its keep with a number of discoveries we can make in and about it, but holy fuck, does it drag out so long, and does it drag this case down. The lamiwa on the tower and the one that reappear are actually different people, evidenced in the change in brooch, and the real lamiwa had a headset on. You can actually hear the gunshot if you isolate her vocals in a fun minigame. We pause for the last time, prepping to get Darian on the stand. Wright is super enigmatic and mentions that you really won't be able to get him by conventional means. This is super important, and I'll get to it more clearly at the end here. Darian makes a pretty convincing argument on the stand. There really isn't any clear evidence right now, and the whole case is on Lamiwa's testimony, who's probably protecting Maki. Remember, Darian's a pretty strong antagonist. We point out that perhaps the gunshots in the third set were firecrackers also found at the scene. The turning point here is being able to hear a clear gunshot through Lamiwa's headset. Gavin, who's really so cool in this case, speculates that maybe Darian missed his cue in the performance because he dislocated his arm shooting the high caliber revolver. We've got a decent motive here too. Darian smuggled the cocoon out with Maki to sell as a cure of the disease Incuritis, which, holy fucking shit, that name is hilarious. And when the plan went south, they burned the guitar the cocoon was hidden in. Everything seems to fall together, but no decisive evidence. This is the running thread of this game. Why do so many Ace Attorney fans hate the third case of most games, but love Trials and Tribulations? The same reason, really. Trials has one through-lying narrative thread. Pretty much every case weaves together beautifully and are well interrelated, whereas most third cases in the games are unrelated to the overarching plot. So I don't get why that isn't acknowledged in Apollo Justice. The jury system very clearly turns up as an alternative to the state of the law and the courts. It's huge in this case. Sometimes decisive evidence is scarce. You really feel that here when you're fighting with Darian. It's excellent, and it ties into the whole idea that this game is trying to go for. Apollo barely catches Darian by getting Maki to confess to smuggling to get off the hook for murder. This is excellent. Gavin is careful not to blindly pursue a guilty verdict for Maki, and Apollo is careful not to get him acquitted of all charges. He is a little guilty, and both lawyers seek above all else the truth. Darian breaks down, and this tangled case finally wraps up. Maki Tobaye taking off his glasses and smiling like this always makes me a little bit emotional. There are tons of little holes and inconsistencies that I won't bother nitpicking in this case, but they make the resolution of this case feel uneasy and imperfect. That's probably the intended state, though. We scored a very narrow victory, and above all else, we leave feeling like something probably has to change with the current judicial system. And what better setup could you ask for Apollo Justice's big finale, Turnabout Succession? I'm having a hard time ending this by saying anything negative. You can really feel the soul in this case. It wears its heart on its sleeve so bravely, and it really believes in the ideas that it's trying, even after like 10 viewings of this video. Hit or miss, I love the risks this case took, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have just so much fun with it. If it's been a few years maybe, go back and try this case once more, because for me, this is peak Apollo Justice. It's a little heavy-handed, but it's so curious and brave. It's pretty crisp around the edges, and most of all, it embodies perfectly what you and I love about Ace Attorney. Thank you, as always, for watching.